Uh, This episode is proudly brought to you by Optimum Financial Services Group. Optimum has the expertise to guide you through investment, tax, retirement, and estate planning, with a tailored solution to your individual needs. Our objective is to provide you with an optimum solution to protect your wealth. Optimum has expertise in medical aid, legal services, asset finance, and short-term insurance, as well as specialized services in commercial, marine, aviation, and personal liability. Don't choose the average, choose Optimum. Optimum Financial Services Group is an authorized financial services provider. Well, good afternoon to you. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining. Today I have a special guest. I'd like to call him a mentor and a friend. We'll get into that now. But what's very special about Professor Johann Coetzee, a lot of you have remarked and shared your comments and thoughts of having dealt with him professionally, personally. But having spoken with Andre, his son, and the boss of Henley Air a couple of months ago, I asked him to just share a few words because I knew that Johann is quite a humble guy and he wouldn't share too much about himself. So let me just read a few words of the intro that he shared with me just to bring you up to speed. So he says, "My dad is a truly remarkable man. He comes from humble beginnings in Bloemfontein and attended Grey College. He was never fond of school, and this is important, but loved sports, teams, and camaraderie." Okay, then I'm going to fast forward a little bit later where he loved university and literally excelled at everything he attempted. He represented the Free State, or the Orange Free State as it was, in rugby, water polo, swimming, and was part of the famous 1968 rugby tour to the UK and Europe. Later, he became the youngest professor to be appointed, and he never stopped studying and now holds 3 doctorates, along with numerous emeritus professorships at various universities. He concludes this by saying, "He's been a friend and a mentor to many, many airline, aerobatic, helicopter pilots, and continues to counsel and debrief pilots in distress to this day." So I don't want to embarrass him any further than that, but Andre says, signing off, I salute him, and I consider that if you can get that kind of message from your son, you've done something right. So please stay with me. My name's Alex McPhail, and this is High Performance Teams. Johann, welcome. I'm so privileged to have you on the show, and thank you for your time today.
I'm privileged. And just by the way, who brought in that 340 in France there? Was that you?
I was one of the crew members. I was there was 3 airplanes that went in that day. I was the junior pilot on the day, so I was sitting in the middle seat, making sure that everything's right. And because we landed first, I hopped out and was ready for the next plane to come, and I managed to film that one. So that was Robbie Rotenbach landing that. And if you noticed, that was probably the most perfect A340 landing that certainly I have on video anyway. It was a wonderful, wonderful landing.
I was just going to congratulate you, but you were in there, and that matters. Beautiful.
Yeah,
lovely footage.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's great to have you on the show. And a couple of things that stand out for me there that, from his intro, which is why I spent so much time reading the letter from Andre, and thank you, Andre, for that, is that A, you didn't particularly do well at school or enjoy school, but yet thrived at university, and that B, you excelled at lots of things. And it just gives me a sense that if people find their groove, I'm just seeing an error message if it's not going on LinkedIn. Give me a moment. Looks like your stream's not working. Ooh, that's a problem. Okay, I'm gonna have to just carry on for now. Sorry about that. If somebody finds their groove, they can really be in a whole different space, you know, coming from school. So maybe just share your 2 cents worth of school versus university. One place you're seemingly doing okay, but thriving in another, and both institutions of learning. What changed?
Well, I think, and when I say I think, probably I think I know that at school, I wasn't part of the in crowd, in a so-called prestigious school. And that develops an inferiority which inhibits you. You just don't excel. My greatest achievement at school was coming third in a cross-country run. And I think to some extent that ignited something in terms of self-worth. But what I can add and have learned subsequently is that adversity can very often be extremely useful. I remind myself of a friend of mine who comes from a similarly humble background, who said to me that it was useful for him because it triggered within him something which he now recounts by, "I'll show you." And my friend Henny certainly achieved that far beyond what I may have achieved. So great school, an inferior scholar, and some sense of "I'll show you."
Okay. Well, I mean, I can certainly relate on some aspects. This idea that I'll show you. You just push me hard enough, and I'll get to a point where I have to make it work, etc.
Yeah.
But certainly the bit that really stands out for me, and which I want to share with people listening, is that in the right environment, the exact same person can develop and thrive to a degree that's almost unrecognizable.
That is very true. And what is significant also, Alex, is that if you have the benefit and the privilege of being surrounded by a couple of people who detect the latent, if not dormant, talents or skills or potential within you, and if you connect wisely with them, they are extremely useful. And I had one or two such teachers at school, and they inspired me greatly. And when I went to university, there was no legacy. It was zero base. You're your own person, and things just happen very differently. And you discover that I can actually do this thing, and there's nothing that can stop you. And I'm pleased that it happened that way.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I hope it's an encouraging message. I know you look back at the end of having now retired and had 40 plus years of service to society and to people, and looking back to the beginning and how something was unlocked, and maybe for others listening, there is that thing sitting there unlocked, and you just need the right set of circumstances, but also somebody to just say, you know what, I see something there, and have you thought about that? Have you explored this, and how could you make it better? But
exactly.
The other part I wanted to bring up in his tribute here is he mentioned that you had over 27,000 people that you've counseled, which is an incredible number, and the fact that you've tracked it, it tells me a lot about how you approach it as well, which is great. A bit like a pilot in the logbook, and you are a helicopter pilot for many decades too, and we'll get into that. But the approach as well. Maybe we can just kick off. We talked off air a minute ago about your role at Cricket South Africa, helping to screen and find the right candidate to take over coaching. And before you give more information, I just want to highlight the point that here's the best coach in the world, Gary Kirsten. He's just won the World Cup for India, and he's considering coming for the role in South Africa, and there was a short list. Yeah. And your role in this picture is to identify the right candidate and how it'll mix and marry. But it's incredible that the best coach in the world is now finding a relationship in you such that he knows he's done a good job. He's got a trophy to prove it and a billion Indians to support him to show it, but yet find some value and friendship with you. So maybe you can just talk us through that story and how it evolved into a mentorship, friendship relationship.
Gladly, and it certainly was a great privilege. And a humbling experience. As you mentioned, I was retained by Cricket South Africa to assess the shortlisted candidates for the position at the time. And obviously, Gary was a candidate. And I prepared copious notes of questions because he's just come off this exceptional achievement. And he arrived in his khaki brooks and a T-shirt and a rucksack and sat down, and we had tea, and my first question to him was, okay, why do you aspire to coach this team? And he shattered me with his retort by saying, I can't teach them cricket. They're all better than me. And I said something like, so what are you doing here? He said, I'd like to do the following. He says, if I succeed, if I were to be selected to influence all of these guys to become better human beings, that'll make me happy. And I said, how do you set out to do that? And he said, if I can
Johann, you there? We've lost you a little bit. The audio is off. Oh dear. Okay, well, we just wait for him to connect up once again there. All right, so just let me fill you in a little bit more about the juicy stuff about Johann while we wait for his connection to come back. He's sitting at Henley Air at the moment, the offices in the boardroom at Henley Air in Johannesburg, and was inspirational. Part of the message, the tribute that Andre shared with me the other day, was to say that he was inspirational and key in setting up Henley Air back in 1995. And although he wasn't involved in the day-to-day running of Henley Air, he certainly the sort of the business ethics and the way of interacting with people, customers, clients, etc. He's shared a lot of value. And again, it's evident when you read the kind of message that you get as a celebration from a son to a father. So it's evident. Johann has been flying helicopters. He had a helicopter PPL in the 80s. Him and Andre bought a helicopter together late in the 80s, and this build eventually got into what became Henley Air. And he spent many decades flying helicopters, and there's another brother who also flies helicopters. And being someone who's involved in high-profile group HR directors for big corporates, and coaching and mentoring people on a level like Gary Kirsten, best coach in the world, and then Gary decides to use Johann as a mentor, speaks volumes. So he'll be sought after, and is sought after, to go and give talks in places like schools. And one of the stories that comes out is they went to give a talk at a school, and he was the guest speaker, and he flew himself in the helicopter. This in his 70s, I think late 70s, still flying himself in, and just shows you the accomplishments and the ability of the individual who works hard and delivers on what he suggests to do. 27,000 people later, and still part of the helping, sharing, giving more back to society, and helping others. So I'm going to try and check and see if I can get the connection up and running again. I don't see him sitting in the waiting room yet. Hopefully that will get sorted out in a moment. If you can just bear with me a little bit longer, please. Let me just check in on the phone. Please share your questions if you have any. You're welcome to join the show. I see some of the comments coming in. Jordan saying, hello, how's it? Jordan, awesome tribute to Professor Johann. I agree. I mean, if you're a son and you've got that kind of message coming, if you're a father and you've got that message coming from your son, how awesome it would be to receive that, knowing you've done a good job. And Heidi Fulshank saying from LinkedIn, saying, hello, Johann, wonderful to see you again. And a LinkedIn user, Anonymous, says 27,000. Wow, very lucky 27,000 people. I agree. That's lucky indeed. And Prince joining us. Hello, Johann Coetzee. Prince saying, I'd like to know more about his journey as a helicopter pilot. We're going to get to that. Hopefully we get him back on the show. And another LinkedIn user saying, now that's an entrance. Arrived by helicopter. Indeed. Can you imagine you invite this gentleman who's a professor, holds 3 or 4 doctorates by now, retired, ended his career, and flies himself in a helicopter, land on the school field, walk inside and give the talk. I think you've got you're a way to share your message with credibility right there. Jordan, please keep us posted on his itinerary. Alex, what a privilege it would be to attend one of his talks. I will do. We'll get into it. I've just heard from Andre now. We're trying to connect up once more. So I'll just keep you guys up to date so long. And Linnell, busy sorting out the Wi-Fi. Thank you, Linnell. So that's daughter-in-law. I appreciate that. Also an accomplished individual. One day we're going to have a chat with you too. A traffic control helicopter pilot. And Heidi coming in again. I'm not sure if you're a part of the professional network, the family, or whatever. I've heard Johann speak more than 10 times at various conferences. and inspired every time. So there you go, folks. It's a vote of confidence. And there we are, coming back in. I'm going to add you to the stream now. I see she's back and just assisting. So if you just give us a moment, here we are. Add to the stream. There we are. Okay.
Yeah.
Johann, we're back again.
Yes. Some
Okay,
able
so
assistance here.
Thank you. Is that Linnell helping you?
That's Linnell helping.
Thank you so much. And I've just went through some of the comments and questions. Unfortunately, didn't see it. So if you've got LinkedIn or YouTube playing there, I can hear it coming through. Maybe we can close that browser now. But just to say that people are really keen for your itinerary. We've only been speaking about 6-7 minutes, and they already want to know where you're talking next. How can we hear your talk? How can we get involved? So we must get to that and share whatever your itinerary is for public speaking. I know it's on a reduced scale at the moment. Let me just share this one, Johann. I don't know if Heidi Forsering, someone you know well. I've heard Johann speak more than 10 times at various conferences and inspired every time. And Adolf saying, a true inspiration for all South Africans and far beyond. And Carnet, a friend of mine from the investment institutional space and retirement fundings net group, he's saying would love to attend one of his talks. So letting you know that there's people that are eager to hear your message. So let's get into it. I don't know where we left off, but from some of those comments, what stands out to me is that people have heard your message and they like what they hear. Ooh,
I'm encouraged by that, because essentially when is there?
Yep, we're back
Hello?
again.
Alex? Okay.
Yep.
I'm flattered that people have derived benefit from these public talks, and probably even at the universities where I worked, because essentially the message has always been about, get life. Get a balanced, integrated lifestyle. Don't overwork. Respect the fact that because of your achievement motive, your intrinsic achievement motive, you're likely to distort relationships and perhaps even burn some of the values that you cherish. So if some people have from that, and I really appreciate the flattering comments, then I'm grateful.
Okay, well, that's great. I want to get to that now, but because we were on the middle of something, Chris, a friend and colleague from the Air Force back in the day, has said, great cliffhanger. Can't wait to hear what Gary Kirsten's answer was to the question. How is he going to make better persons of the criteria? So maybe we can pick up there again, Johann, please. What did he answer?
Okay, let's return that. Well, it was so profound. He said to me that if I succeed in influencing the individuals in the team to become better human beings, he says, then I would have succeeded. And obviously, I asked him, how do you intend doing that? He said, if I can also influence the team to win humility, and in that way allow, as he put it, opposition to lose dignity, he says, then we're playing the game right. And there was silence and more tea, and CSA appointed him.
Okay, wow. It sounds like one of those meetings and conversations where things just clicked. And from there, I wouldn't say the rest is history, but what happened from there? Because after that, was that the first time you'd interacted with Gary?
Absolutely. Other than admiring him, throughout the IPL and so on, and the World Cup. But we remained friends. I would never say that I was his mentor. I regarded a privilege that he called me his friend and still does. I might just also mention that I invited him to the business school at the University of the Free State subsequently, and just asked him to come and tell his story. And the hall was full. And the rector at the time, Jonathan Janssen, attended. And the way we presented that particular session was that I interviewed him. And he just replied based on whatever we agreed I would interview him on. And Jonathan Janssen afterwards got up and said this was the best lecture he'd ever heard on dynamic leadership. And he wasn't even talking about leadership specifically. He was revealing his humanity. And we were all just, again, stunned. A special man.
Well, that's great, and people are really enjoying the kind of conversation around Gary. And I don't want to make the conversation all about Gary because I want to get into your headspace. But I can't help
stay
but,
there. Stay with Gary.
I can't help but think, what goes through my head, the way you're describing your interactions with him and the person. I mean, we had a great conversation with him a few months ago, which you set up, and I thank you profusely for that. One of my idols growing up, and had a wonderful chat with Gary a few months ago on this show.
Great.
But what I think about is I recently watched that Chasing the Sun documentary with the Springboks journey in Japan, and
Yes.
how Rassie had inspired the team in a different kind of way. And some of the attributes are similar. Have you watched that Chasing the Sun? Or you know the story
Yes.
more than just popular? Yeah. And amazing how you built up this team. You talked a lot about humility, and I just felt like that real. I mean, they made it like a cliffhanger too. This 5-part series, and the last 15 minutes was about that speech in the locker room as you go out. You don't have the right to play for yourself today. And it's a similar kind of message coming through there. That what Gary was saying is, allow the opposition to lose with humility. And I don't know, something struck a chord. What do you think about Rassie's message as it compares to someone like Gary's message?
Well, the skill that these people have as great leaders is to identify individual talent, first of all, because people have personality. You never, ever have an absolute team where people are unanimous about everything, because people differ. But a leader or a coach or whatever you're going to call the principal of that team must have that insight, not trying to unite everybody in the same way. Allow them the latitude to remain themselves. But as he intimated, you're not playing rugby or for the score or for the moment or for the audience there, but you're playing for a country, for something much larger, an ideology that you probably don't even understand on the day because of your stress. But a leader who understands that, who can differentiate and then unite whatever is similar, if you can detect that, you stand a chance to be successful. Rassie got that right, and there are obviously many other people who get it right. In politics, virtually nobody gets it right.
Well, yeah, we could probably end up a conversation of politics for a while. But every time you answer, I'm writing down notes about other things I want to get to. A few minutes ago, we spoke about the point that it's very overused, the word balance in your life, but we understand the principle that you can't just focus on one area only. You have to have a holistic view. You are somebody who has done a lot. You've just finished studying again. I don't know how many degrees you have, 7, 4 doctorates. I mean, you're an epitome of someone who works hard. You fly helicopters, or retired now, but it must have been a point in your life where life got busy. How did you manage to do so many things, but keep the perspective and the balance and include the relationships and still get to your retirement phase and look back on your life and see the wonderful relationships you still managed to foster? How do you do so much yet stay so grounded?
Well, first of all, will you just promise that my wife will never view this program, because I'm going to answer you. The point is that, passing the exam or even getting a cum laude, on the theory of a balanced, integrated lifestyle, or work-life integration, as it's now called, in itself doesn't mean that you've got a license not to mess up. And I worked too hard. I was not the optimum dad. Granted, we had 4 children in 4 years. So the next thing you realize, you'll have 4 at varsity at the same time, and you've got to provide. So you work hard. But you neglect relationships, unquestionably. Thank goodness my good wife stayed with me throughout those years. But in some instances, you calculate, and I found that I worked 42 days a month and I slept away 12 nights a month. That's a recipe for absolute disaster. And it's not because you're smart or you think that you're omnipotent. Of course, there's an ego factor in it, and I admit that openly. But there wasn't balance for a large portion of my career. I was really too concerned to serve and service others and neglect myself and my next of kin. But you wisen up at some stage, and you become very clever when you hurt. When you reach the point where introspectively you discover the fact that you're all things to other people and you're not that much for yourself and for your family, and that's a good point to reach, but hopefully timelessly. And I did. I'm grateful for that.
Okay, so I want to just stay on the helicopter theme for a little bit before we get back into academics again. What was that drive for you to decide this is it? Because did you only fly helicopters, or did you fly fixed wing as well?
I did a fixed wing conversion as well. I did it the wrong way. I first did the rotor wing and then the fixed wing, purely from a safety perspective, because I chartered often, and on one occasion my pilot fell asleep, so I had to get this thing down. Anyway, it all happened this way, and it's actually an interesting story, if not a funny anecdote. My children asked me to take them to the opening of the Pick and Pay in Bedford Center in Bedworth in Vanderbilt Park, because Superman and the Incredible Hulk was going to jump out of this helicopter.
Okay.
So with a bit of a duck back, I took my family that morning to the Pick and Pay, and the helicopter duly landed, and my kids were handed sweets from Superman. And I was staring at the chopper. Anyway, an hour later, we were all flying in that same chopper at Rand Airport.
Oh, wonderful.
And the Monday I started my training, and that was in 1981.
Oh, wow.
So thanks to my kids and Superman and the Incredible Hulk, I got my license 9 months later.
A funny story happened. I met Superman. He gave my kids sweets, and the next thing I was flying helicopters.
That's it. Isn't that the nice title for a movie or a book? As
Wonderful.
pathetic as it sounds.
No, I think it sounds amazing. Look, my sister is joining us from Australia, Nicola. Thank you, welcome. Said, love Johann's honesty. And another LinkedIn user saying, your wife would be very proud of you for owning that, sir. So well done. Johann, okay, so helicopters. So when you did that training, you enjoyed it and you just kept going? Or was there a point of, well, I can afford a license and let's see what happens next? Because it's not a cheap or easy thing to do. Let's be honest about that. So to do it is something that, well, you can get through. Now I've got a PPL or whatever it is you're going for. But to then continue to use the skill of being a private pilot on a helicopter costs a lot of money every hour. So what was the vision from there? Or was it just, I need to get into this thing, I need to understand it?
Well, I guess it was an ego thing at the time. I wanted to be a chopper pilot. At the same time, I needed a hobby and something to focus on other than my work and my studies. And it certainly served the purpose. And all tribute to Buzz Besaidnout and John Pocock, who at the time actually understood what I was all about, that it was far more or deeper than just flying choppers. I just did training on little R22 Hotel Lima Victor. And I actually bought a share in HLV at the time. And I realized very soon afterwards that Andre, who was my eldest son, also showed an affinity for the helicopter. And after his studies as a mechanical engineer, I asked him, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to do this thing. And had him trained. And I must mention this even on the air, that at the time, Andre, after he finished his studies and qualified as an engineer, he became an apprentice at NAC in the engine shop. And NAC at the time did not own helicopters. They used helicopters of other owners. And they were doing platinum runs every day, transferring platinum from the mines to the beneficiary plant. And I approached them and said, if we get a Jet Ranger, would they use it? And they said yes. And I said, but can my son, who works in your engine shop, please fly it? And they agreed. So we bought Hotel Delta Whiskey, and Andre flew it and built up ours. We've brought the platinum safe to the plant, and NAC started Henley Air.
Well, that's a great story. I like it, and we touched on that a little bit when Andre and I chatted a few months ago. But just to understand the perspective, you would have had a significant role to play. Not taking anything away from Andre, but the role in, we need to do something, and we're doing something wild. We're talking millions of rands. We're talking debt. We're talking risk. We're talking so much. I mean, a helicopter is a risky thing anyway. If you compare it to just a car or a bicycle, it's way more complex, way more expensive to buy, operate, and to fix. This is a major risk with a lot of debt. What goes through your head? Do you just see the potential for good and forget about the bad? How do you weigh that up? How do you make that decision? We're buying a multi-million rand piece of equipment and starting something here. That's a conversation I'd like to have. How do you do that? How do you get that through your head?
Well, firstly, you get very little through your head and a lot through your heart. It's
Okay.
pure passion and stupidity initially, and obviously you believe in the project. Naturally, you do research. You scan the market and you look at opportunities, and it would be remiss of me not to pay tribute to those people and institutions which were very kind to us. And I mention again NAC, they were good mentors to us and gave us opportunities. But then you take a second and third and fourth bond on your house and you buy a Hotel Delta whiskey at that time for 700,000 rands, and you pawn your children's clothes and underwear, and you generate some cash. And in that process, what happens is that you started naively, and it works. And in this instance, I can say to you, and I'm very grateful for it, that I just want to click something here. I was most fortunate that the market was right at the time, and we generated some business. And I must pay tribute to Andre, who was truly the operating guy. I was involved with a bit of support and hopefully a slice of wisdom as well. And from there, it flourished.
Yeah, it's an amazing story, and I also want to understand then a lot of people have these crazy ideas, and people close to them with good intentions, friends, families, neighbors. When you pitch something like, "Hey, I'm thinking of bonding my house and potentially using the kids' savings fund to buy a helicopter or a boat to do boat charters or a game farm or something just a little bit way out and not routine," you naturally get the resistance saying, "Oh, that doesn't sound like a smart idea." I mean, you must have had those detractors too. How did you approach those people in your life?
Well, even intimate friends said to me, it's a sort of a romantic thing. It's a dream. It's an ego thing. But I can honestly say that it was an extension of what I liked and what worked for me, namely to fly a helicopter. But I can say that I actually entered this venture for my children, for Andre specifically, who said he's not going to be a practicing engineer, that he's an entrepreneur. And he just took to it in a very specific way, continued his studies at the same time, which I insisted on. And what I can add, without you asking it, Alex, is that in any family business, it is wise to step away as the pioneer at the right time, because your presence inhibits the ingenuity of your children, because they respect you, and then they don't ask you, and in particular, don't ask you to disappear. Okay. And I was fortunate enough to be guided by my wife to say, "You've just resigned." So I handed all the shares and everything over to Andre, even as a director and as a chairman, and said, "I'll phone you for permission to enter the premises."
Okay, well, that's a very humbling approach too. I mean, especially if you're very inspirational in being part of this, and getting it off the ground and to step away, not an easy thing. And it kind of ties in with the question from Kobus on LinkedIn. Kobus is asking, please ask the prof if he has any mentors, or who or where does he go when he runs out of answers. So that makes me think, at that time and today, who are your mentors? Or who helps you? Good question, Johann.
Yeah,
Kobus?
I make a point of it to surround myself with wise people, but only a few of them have the courage to engage in the courageous conversations. And I have three such people in particular who I meet regularly and who will cut to the chase on who I am and tell me the things that I don't want to hear. And those are the things I ought to hear. So as much as my career has been one of counseling people and even treating people in therapy as a psychologist, I also need help very often, or a perspective tested, or even some reprimand heard. And I salute those very, very special individuals who continue to do that. Of course, I negate everything my wife does in this regard. I just want to be married to her. She mustn't tell me.
A very honest answer there too. Thank you. Rooks is joining us, another great man in aviation. Thanks, Rooks. He's saying, well done for trapping the prof for an interview, Alex. Plenty of wisdom on tap here. Well, Rooks, you're also a great guy. Have you flown with Rooks? I know you would have seen each other a lot at Henley Air, but have you flown with him?
I flew with Rooks only twice as a passenger. And Rooks, I think on one occasion you allowed me the jump seat, and I think it was still on a 200. That's about 200 years ago. But I see Rooks often at Henley Air, and as you know, he's the instructor on the simulator, and just one of those very special aviators. And I would humbly say, if not aggressively, a victim of the demise of SAA.
Yeah, well, I had a great flight. I had a couple of flights with Rooks, and we've certainly had many interactions over the years at SAA. But one flight that stands out, while he's online here, let me share this story. We flew to London together. I was his co-pilot, and he was all set. We're going to go watch the Proteas play. I think it was at Lord's. Maybe you can correct me. But we arrived in London, delay at the hotel, delay in the traffic to get to the hotel, all those things, rooms. Eventually we get our rooms, and he says, well, let's just have a little power nap and then go watch the cricket. I said, okay, well, what time were you thinking of going? He said, no, whatever the time was, 10:30 or whatever. It meant we had 20 minutes in bed before we were going to wake up and go spend the day in the sun watching cricket. Anyway, we did that and we had a wonderful time, and thank you, Rooks. That was a great time. Thanks for joining the show too. Another great man.
Yes, indeed.
But, you sent me that the manuscript of your latest book, and we can dive into it a little bit. But a couple of things that stand out: aphorisms, if I've said it correctly. Maybe just tell me, what are aphorisms, and then I want to ask you about one or two of them.
They are sort of potent sayings which emerge from experiences or observations. For example, if you have to motivate an executive, fire him because executives are motivated. That's an aphorism. Whether it's correct or not is probably not the point. Is it pertinent? That's the point. And I observed and heard those over the years that I worked in organizations and in academia, and noted them. I recorded them, and 320 of them emerged, which serve as the nucleus of this book, and the title of the book is Revealing the Corporate Soul. So I've added text, as it were, around these aphorisms, as we call them.
Okay, all right. And also you mentioned off air that you also kept track of the work you've done in HR, managing people, counseling, guiding, assisting leaders and making good strategic decisions, etc. And humble enough to say that not a very high success rate in terms of percentages, but maybe it's indicative of what happens out there. So I don't know if you'd want to share that, you're keeping track of the work you've done and how it worked.
Gladly. The nature of my work in organizations is essentially been on organization renewal, and to assist organizations to become more effective, to hopefully improve leadership, and in particular also executive wellness or holistic wellness. That was sort of the domain in which I operated. I tried to calculate my so-called effectiveness or efficacy rate, success rate, over the years, the decades that I worked in this domain. And I would say that I was probably only successful in 17% of the occasions. And the reason being that people hear you, they're probably impressed with what you bring, the interventions that you implement with their sanction, until the next fad. And then you're obsolete. They employ the next thing which seems to be fashionable, or that has some resonance with the executives, and then they go for that. And I'm not criticizing it. I think that people were essentially always on the lookout for something better that can improve organization efficiencies. But in only 3 occasions with corporates was I retained for longer than a decade. In the other instances, they buy you in, they hear you, they like you, and then they like the next person.
Okay. And these fads, I mean, the fad could be anything from 18 months to 2 or 3 years long. Yeah. How do we know when you're on a fad and when you're on something good that can survive a decade? Do you know as the individual trying to sell it?
Well, if you
In
look at,
a loose sense of
sorry,
the word selling. I mean, in a very loose sense of the word selling. I mean, you're trying to share the good news of it, not make a buck.
yes. Although it would be dishonest for me to say that I didn't want to be paid well because I needed that revenue. But I think there's a tinge of honesty in me saying that I was truly keen on influencing the decision makers, the executive of organizations, the assembled intellect, so that they would formulate informed decisions that would have this positive impact on organizations. But in most cases, Alex, what changes is only the vocabulary. If you read the Harvard Business Review, you will find that they regurgitate the same thing. And I'm not criticizing it. What was called something 5 years ago is just called something today. So if you talk of lethargy 5 years ago, they now call it entropy. And now it's a big thing, and it's a prominent author or a consultant. And people would say, that's what we need. This will make the change. And I would, and did later in my career, say to people, let's just strip all the verbiage out of it. For example, people are still involved in missions and visions and codes of conduct and ethics, etc. And I say to people, scrap all of that just for 10 minutes and answer one question, and that is, what is our sense of purpose? What are we doing here? Not what are we saying about what we're not doing. And I was grateful that I had that sort of slice of wisdom towards the end of my career, and people listened to it. And if I may add, instead of going into these vast organization, toxic and purging exercises, etc., I just said to people, let's do an irritation audit, and who's causing it, and get rid of them.
I like that. Very call it as it is, down to earth, an irritation audit. But it makes
and
me think
also, we used to say, and I might just add this anecdote, that you were responsible for employing bad people, and what we're saying to them is, therefore, don't fire them, but invite them to go and be average elsewhere.
yes, that's one I wanted to pick up on, and thank you. So
go ahead.
Be average elsewhere, and that gives them an opportunity to step up or be average elsewhere. It's less, in a way, it's less confrontational. It's saying we are better than average. Can you be better than average and be part of us?
Yeah, but people have already proven by that point that they can't match that. And I think it's good conduct, and sadly too late, but nevertheless good conduct to say to people, if you remain here, you will be very unhappy. Go and be happy elsewhere.
That also, I've just finished listening to Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. Also, he's got a great message. He talks about the golden circle, much like your comment a moment ago about what is the purpose here. Let's scrap everything for 10 minutes. What's the purpose? And he says, start with why. But he shares a story about the barista who is working at this hotel, and he thrives, and he's a great person. And Simon orders a coffee from him, and he has such a great chat with him. And because he's curious and he writes books and consults, he asks him, tell me about working here. Why are you so happy? He said, everything I do here, every person that I work for, any boss at any level will come past multiple times a day and say, John, how can I be helpful for you doing your job today? Is there anything I can do to make your job better? And they just create a culture of wanting to share and offer. And that gives me the space to say either, yes, I need help, or no, I can do this thing. But at the same time, I work at another hotel down the road on the weekends where the culture is completely different. And he's saying, same barista, same job. But in that job, he's sitting ducking for cover, because every time I look around, somebody's making sure I'm doing my job properly. Some manager is checking on him. Did he count the beans correctly? And he operates there, keeping his head under the radar. And in this other hotel where Simon met him, he's sitting there with a smile, and people are giving him tips because he's doing a great job. And it makes me think in my own business as well. How do we create those environments such that the people can thrive? What approach do you take to make it as good as you can, and then, as you say, invite them to be average elsewhere, because we're not trying to be average.
Exactly. I'm reminded of my second boss in my career, who's the late Sydney Press. I worked for Edgar's, and he called me in one day. I was young, 25 or so, and he said to me, I want to make you a great offer today. And I said, trembling, yes, sir. And I thought it's an increase or a motor car or something. And he said, everything you tell me, I'm going to believe. And he said, go away and think about it.
Yeah, wow.
And the second thing he said to me is that when you become a supervisor, never become super, nor a visor. Infiltrate your people and serve and service them.
Okay.
And I only realized the significance and the potency of it probably a decade later, but I received it nevertheless.
Okay, that's
so
great.
what is leadership really? You know, it's like Churchill, who said that the first job of government is not to govern at all. And if you have to consistently lead people all the time, then there's just a tinge of slavery in there. People must be inspired to lead themselves.
Sure.
Of course, they believe in your wisdom or in your vision or perhaps an inspirational concept. But by goodness, at an adult level, you lead yourself. You have your own mentality and your own personality. And if people embrace it and endorse what you think, that's useful. And if you can harness such mental energy to go in the right direction or in a similar direction, I think you're busy succeeding as a leader.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I subscribe to that. And going back to your book of aphorisms, another one that stood out for me that I want to ask you about is number 72. You must use a dictaphone. Can you share a little bit more about that, please?
I'm still aghast that by far the majority of all senior people still type it out, stare into a monitor screen, and don't use the time that they can to record and communicate by virtue of a dictaphone. And as you know, you can now transplant, as it were, your oral text onto the computer of your PA, and it's processed from anywhere in the world. And whenever we worked with executives in terms of their personal attributes and competencies, the first thing we do is we teach them how to use a dictaphone, and we insist that that's the way they do it. And one of the best bits of utilization of a dictaphone is critical incident notes. When you drive home at night, you dictate at least 5, call it love letters, to individuals who are waiting for your endorsement. Whether it's a birthday or a sadness or an encouragement or an achievement or whatever, you do that every day of your life with your dictaphone, and it changes the culture of an organization that day. But when go ahead, sorry.
Tell me more about that. My head's racing, but tell me more. So every day, 5 messages
every day,
on the dictaphone.
You find at least 5 individuals who qualify for your attention. Okay. That means you know who they are. That's a guy who's going yachting on the Val Dam on Saturday. You know it. And you just drop a 2-liner saying, I know you're going, good luck, be safe, and please tell me how it went. That kind of thing. Instead of typing it yourself, even if you know it, you don't have that time. It erodes your time available to think and to meditate on the things you ought to think about deeper. Get off the computer so that you can walk amongst your people. And one of the things that I've also been taught by people who know far better than I is that 20% of your time, that's a day a week, you spend amongst your people. And when asked, what do you do there? The answer is, you'll find out when you get there. But don't remain in your office, and get off your laptop. Go and embrace people.
Okay. You've made me think of so many things there. And when I read that aphorism, you must use a dictaphone, I interpreted it a different way, keeping track of notes, etc. But if I understand you correctly now, what you're saying is use the time to speak into a device, because it frees up the typing, the motor skill. Also, there might be times where you don't have, like driving, you shouldn't be typing on a device. So it frees up motor ability and safety, and makes you more efficient. Is that the message you're sharing?
Exactly. But it's also useful in terms of menial things, like to your PA, remind me to get chlorine for the pool and dog food, etc., and flowers for my wife, or whatever it is. But with this thing in your hand, it just changes your life. And I still stand aghast that people just don't do it.
Okay, something I'm going to implement now. We have these devices with us all the time, and we can do voice notes, and yeah, you're right, we just don't do it. The other part that I had read into it was not only keeping track, but maybe, tell me where this lands with you, maybe you would play it back every now and then, hopefully regularly, because you want to keep track of that note and what it means to you, is that you get to hear yourself and how you sound, and maybe be conscious of the words you use, the phrase, how clear you speak, mumbling, the passion that comes through, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Does any of that land with you?
Absolutely, and I've been doing it for years. As you can hear, I'm not proficient enough yet. But even preparing speeches or talks, when I'm in the car, I say them out, as it were, and go home and listen to myself critically, and even invite my my PA to tell me you've slipped up here, or that word was out of context. And talking of words, one of the great benefits of using a dictaphone, and I know we're going down the line a bit, is to just note every word that you use or that you hear that you don't know, and you get the meaning and then use it. So is to improve your communication and oratory skills. And that's just a job in process.
Sure. Well, I mean, one of our becoming a friend, he's working with me, and I'm working with him, and now I consider him a friend. Gideon Lankers is joining the show. He's saying, "Great show, gents," and it's reminded of this exact use of a dictaphone, Johann. So thank you for this tip. We're trying to set this up into a bit more of a formalized podcast, audio-only podcast too, and we had to record the intro jingle and what it would sound like. And I sit at the screen and I type a few words and it doesn't make sense, and I type a few words and it doesn't make sense. I can't help it. Eventually, I just put my camera on, or the audio, video combined, and I talk into it. And I just talk from the hip for 20 seconds. And then I play it back and, well, that sounds good. Let me type that out. And then I talk it again and I play it back. And in that process, I get to understand the message I'm trying to say and how I'm coming across. If I like it, I type it out. Then I read it off script, and now I'm happy. So the same for me. This audio playback and feedback is way more efficient than me just sitting typing.
Well, so true. Hence, the dictum that the best form of development is self-development. And that's an incessant process. It never ends. And as long as you have a bit of savvy left, use it in that regard so that you can enrich yourself, both cognitively and otherwise. And I'm excited about the prospect of having all this technology available with which to continue, and what is still to come.
Sure.
I'm open for it.
Sure. Now, another thing I want to just get back onto two topics. One is we're going to finish up with a bit of flying talk once more, but also because there's been so many questions, are you still on the public speaking platform? Can people hear you anywhere, and how would they get hold of you?
Not at all. I tried semi-retirement, but that's a lie. You work harder than you do when you're full-time employed. My dad, who was semi-literate, a wonderful, wonderful, wise man, once said something to me which didn't resonate at the time, but by goodness, I now understand. And that he said that whatever you're busy with, make sure you leave through the front door. And that for me happened one morning, not so long ago, when I realized that's it. Leave it to other smarter people, and coach them, and meet with them, and share. If you do have wisdom, share that with them, and do that pro bono. And I do that quite a lot. I do that virtually daily, where people just come and say hi, have a coffee, and check a perspective, or test a concept. But public speaking, no. I try and record what I think I've learned, or rather what other people have taught me in a book or two, and hopefully that would influence people to do it better.
Okay, and are you still spending? Now you're about to publish this manuscript you've shared with me. Do you see yourself continuing writing over the next few years? Is that something you want to continue with?
Yes, not with a quest to write and publish as an author, not at all, but almost as the minutes of my career, sort of a vocational set of minutes. Perhaps a reader might just take something useful from it and say, came from that book. I'm not important. It's what's in the book that's important. And whatever we know, we gleaned or heard from somebody else. So the author is not that important. The authors before you are important. And I hope to continue with that.
Well, that would be great. Prof, it's been wonderful chatting with you. I want to end up with one or two helicopter questions. And just before I do that, a message has come through from Brendan on LinkedIn, and he's joining us from the UAE. He said, great to listen to you again, Johann. Dialing in from the UAE. I recall our last lecture with Professor Pete Stoker in 2011. You were the guest speaker.
Goodness.
Until today, I mark it as one of the most captivating lectures. So well done to you, Johann. That's a nice message coming from Brendan. Thank you for sharing.
That's flattering, Brendan. Thank you, and happy landings.
You've certainly touched a lot of people, and as I told you before the show, we're going to get to a point where there's so many more things I wanted to talk about, and time is running out. I don't want to keep you all day. You have been involved in mentoring a lot of pilots. Obviously, being a pilot, that's helpful. Being a psychologist, that's your profession. And you must be able to resonate well. And I know there's some horrific accidents where you've counseled the family members or whatever. Is there anything that stands out with you about counseling pilots in particular that you'd like to share about that?
Gladly. About 18 years ago, we formed the Institute for Aviation Psychology as part of Henley Air at the time, and it still functions. And our business originally was to assist airlines and chief pilots of airlines with situations where they deemed certain pilots to need some counseling in whatever direction. And I'm particularly grateful that people used us for that purpose, and some even undercover because it wasn't allowed. Sure. As you know, CAA still doesn't have a complete and comprehensive protocol for psychological or behavioral assessment as thorough, as the physical assessment is. And we've been trying even since the days of Rennie van Zyl and others. But I pay tribute to people. I'm going to mention it. Johnny Woods of SAA just said, "You just come and do it. We need it. We need to assist people." And we saw, I'm tempted to say, hundreds of pilots over the years, and in particular volunteers who would just come here and say, "I think I need to be just sorted out a bit." And we pay tribute to them, and they remain unmentioned at this time. But then in adversity, at air shows in particular, where we've had these fatalities, you remember Tsanin and the Albatross, as you remember, that stands out in my life as one of the most profound, sad, meaningful, encouraging, blemishing experience ever in our aviation industry, in the informal aviation industry, if I might mention that. Sure. And if we existed for that purpose, then it was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I don't want to get too deep into that, but it had a major impact. I was no longer involved in the airshow circuit by then, but certainly knew all the people well, and yes, a tough one. But as it relates to pilots, we can maybe just share a message of hope or any thoughts you have for them now, being in a, I wouldn't call it a tragedy, but there's certainly major hurt going on around the world. Numbers have been bandied around. 100,000 pilots are out of work. And certainly there's a lot of hurt and blood on the streets, etc. Any thoughts of where to go, what to do, how to use your skills more usefully, and encouragement for them?
If I may pick up answering using the cricket analogy as with aviation, I've always said to cricket players and to pilots, you've got to have a second concomitant activity or career without it being an illegal moonlighting. But if you lose your eyesight or if you break your hand, you're unemployed and unemployable. And people need to do that in good time. What's happened here, and it's nobody's fault that there's this virus that has rendered people desperate in aviation as they are. But you've got to know how ingenious you can be, creative, and whether you do possess the attribute of alternate thinking. And let me be specific, Alex, exactly what you're doing. Your employer has rendered you unemployed. It's not by choice. And let me say, it's not the virus, it's politics that's caused this. In the case of SAA, and I say that openly right now because that is the truth. You've just got to be creative, and you've got to be anticipating that these things could happen, but start in good time. For those pilots who are destitute right now, it's not too late. You don't have to fly to generate revenue. You've got to do other things. You've got to think laterally. And if you need counseling or perspective or some guidance in it, then go and seek it immediately. But don't let your family suffer because of a virus or an industry that's gone pear-shaped. It's not necessary.
Yeah, wise words coming from a wise person. Thank you, Johann. I want to have a last question. So I know that you no longer actively fly, but you do still fly with your sons every now and then. So tell me about the day where you decided to say, that's it. I think that's enough flying on my own. That must be a hard decision too.
It was very easy because I missed a switch overhead on the Bell Jet Ranger because of my eyes. And I turned around, landed, and went up to Andre and gave him my logbook and said, that's it. I will never fly solo again. Because as a proponent of safety and never to negate a single indicator, I had to do exactly that when I experienced it. And it was very easy and proudly so. And as we always say, when in doubt, don't. We should start with ourselves, and I don't regret it at all. I still have the privilege of flying with my children, and whenever we get into an aircraft, they allow me to hold the stick, albeit I do it a bit fraught, but I nevertheless have the privilege, so I fly here.
That's wonderful. A parting comment from our listeners. Wendy Santillano has joined us, another wonderful person in aviation and headspace. So good to see and hear you, Johann. You always offer such profound wisdom, advice, and offer a voice of sanity. Thank you for creating this platform, Alex. Well, thanks for joining us, Wendy. As soon as this conversation went down the street, Wendy is the person I thought of, and certainly some more of your fans out there, Johann. Thank you so much for your time today. Sincerely appreciate it. It was a pleasure. The time went by so quickly, and I hope to have a cup of coffee and counsel with you one day. Maybe at the Henley Airs, we can fly in the simulator together and have a cup of coffee.
I promise we'll take you out of the sim and go up to where you belong. But let me also say, Alex, thank you on behalf of your audience for what you're doing here and stimulating not only the aviation fraternity, but even wider. And I trust that you will continue and invite people of substance and who will have profound impact, because it's hugely educational and inspirational. And I've certainly benefited from your creativity. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and have a wonderful day. And we'll chat again soon.
Look forward. Bye now.
Bye. Well, folks, thank you for joining. As always, a wonderful conversation that kind of wraps up quicker than you wanted to. Appreciate your comments and questions. If you found some value here, please remember to share it with somebody who may also get value. Subscribe to the show and add your comments. Until next time, stay safe.